Everyone, welcome to the fourth and the final session of this brief introduction to the all-encompassing yoga mind meditation that His Holiness the Dalai Lama briefly introduced us to via YouTube last year. So one of the qualities of this particular approach is that the image that goes along with it, that is of a moon disk supporting an upright vajra, is a very, very simple visualization compared to many of the other more involved images that occur. But exactly how we use that image to meditate on is something that we'll have to look at in more depth at some other time. But for the moment, it's just necessary to recognize that the moon disk represents skillful means or a compassionate method, whereas the vajra represents wisdom. Another way of referring to these two is that the moon disk is, excuse me, the moon disk is relative or conventional bodhicitta, and the vajra is ultimate bodhicitta. And the fact that they're supporting each other indicates that this practice, this method, this means for attaining full enlightenment is a union of method and wisdom. So what I'd like to do today is refer to a teaching, which was one of the very first teachings I ever received when studying with Geshe Ngawang Dargye in India back in the 1970s. It's a teaching that many of you have received in one form or another over the years. It's called The 37 Practices of All Bodhisattvas, and written by a member of the lineage of Atisha. And in that teaching, the 37 practices, the last several of these 37 focus
John, can you please unmute? Sorry.
So none of that got through.
No, the last few minutes. And I think it was my mistake to somehow mute you accidentally. So I apologize to everyone.
Yeah, I thought I had unmuted myself when we started, so I didn't notice that. Well, as we say down south, shut my mouth. Listening to myself talk for the first minute or two, I realized that you guys didn't miss anything worthwhile. So I'm going to start over again. And I'm going to do it by reading and commenting a little bit about from a teaching that was given by Geshe Tekchok on a very popular Lojong mind training text called The 37 Practices of All Bodhisattvas. And the last several stanzas of this are talking about the combination, the union of skillful means, also known as method, and wisdom, the union, which is the very heart, the very essence of the Mahayana path to full enlightenment. And in terms of the yoga mind that we've been making reference to over these past few weeks, the skillful means or method is represented by the moon disk, and wisdom is represented by the upright vajra, which is supported by that moon disk. So what constitutes skillful means and wisdom? Well, when we read the stanzas 25, 26, 27, 28, and 29, each one of those talks about the first 5 perfections or paramitas. So these are, as everyone here has probably heard, the perfection of generosity, perfection of ethical discipline. Then comes what's often referred to as patience, or we can think of it as fortitude. The fourth is effort or perseverance. And then the fifth one is concentration. So these 5 together constitute the method or the skillful means of the practice. And then they are supplemented. They're actually turned into perfections by combining them with wisdom. So I'm going to make some references now to how Geshe Tekchok described this in stanza 30. Talking about the wisdom, he says, there are various types of wisdom in the world, such as understanding carpentry, medicine, poetry, and grammar. However, here, this wisdom refers to the wisdom realizing emptiness, the lack of inherent existence. This emptiness is initially realized through reasoning. We have to recognize that the object to be refuted, true existence, what that is, and then investigate to discover if it exists or not. This, of course, is a vast topic, but essentially it indicates that for those of us who have not gained a direct intuitive understanding of reality, all the things that appear to us appear through the force of our past familiarity and karma, appear to be much more solid, concrete, and independent than they are in reality. And that mistaken view is sometimes referred to as inherent existence. In other words, phenomena, including our sense of self, are viewed and conceived to be independently, inherently, intrinsically existing. Or using Lama Zopa's favorite phrase, things appear to exist from their own side without relying on our thought, our perspective. So Geshe Tekchok says that whether we wish to attain the full enlightenment of Buddhahood or just the individual enlightenment or liberation of pures and solitary realizers, both method and wisdom are needed. However, the method in each case is different. For a person wishing to attain full enlightenment, the method is the cultivation of love, compassion, bodhicitta, the first five of the perfections. Without these as the method, there is the danger of falling into the extreme of peace, that is, being satisfied with one's own liberation from cyclic existence and abiding in a peaceful nirvana. Without wisdom, there is the danger of falling into the extreme of samsara, remaining in cyclic existence. So very often the spiritual path is described as ways of avoiding the two extremes. The extreme of samsara, we're all quite familiar with because its nature is suffering. But the other extreme, the extreme of personal liberation, is also something to be avoided by those who have cultivated true loving compassion and as much concern for the welfare of others as we have for our own personal welfare. So it is not in the nature of suffering, the way samsara is, but it still is an extreme of personal, peaceful absorption into our own liberation, which thereby cuts us off from the fellow feeling, the heart connection to be cultivated for those of us emulating the path of a bodhisattva. So those first five attitudes, practiced alone, will not lead to full enlightenment, even though they are virtues. They make up method, which is like having legs. But wisdom is like having eyes. And we need both if we want to get anywhere. Because the first five attitudes, beginning with generosity, right, are said, without wisdom, to be blind. And without wisdom, we can't sever the chain of self-grasping which keep us trapped in samsara. So therefore, practicing a path which unifies method and wisdom is indispensable. Wisdom supported by method means meditating on emptiness with the compassionate motivation of becoming a Buddha to benefit all beings. Method, supported by wisdom, is cultivating the virtuous practices that we mentioned before: love, compassion, generosity, ethical discipline, and so forth. And then something is mentioned which appears in several different forms in many different teachings. It's the three spheres. And I want to say a few brief words about them. Whatever activity we engage in, if we look carefully, we can see that it can be thought of as consisting of three elements dependent upon one another. These three elements can be referred to as the actor or the agent. In other words, the person who's engaging in this particular action that we're analyzing, the action itself, and then the object of that action. So for example, let's take the first of the six perfections, generosity or giving. So what is the agent or the actor? That is the person who's doing the giving, the giver, the actor. And what is the action? The actual act of giving. And the object can be thought of as either the recipient of the gift or the gift itself. So here we have the actor, the act, and the acted upon, what receives that action. If we think of another related type of action, the action of engaging in compassion, then compassion itself is the actor. I'm sorry. The meditator, the one who is meditating on compassion, is the actor. Compassion itself is the act. And since this compassion is directed towards all sentient beings, then all sentient beings, or whichever sentient being we're thinking of, particularly at that moment, is the recipient of that action. So why are these three spheres, actor, act, and acted upon, why are these three spheres mentioned? Because our habit is to see each of those elements as being separate and independent of one another. Whereas in fact, they can only exist in interdependence. For example, if there's no action of giving, then there's no giver. And if there's nothing that's given, then there's no recipient of the action. So even though we can speak of them in language with separate names or identify them individually, they in fact only exist interdependently. And so this gives us a hint for the element of wisdom, that things do not exist independently, solely from their own side, inherently, but exist solely in relationship to all of the other elements to which they are related. So Geshe Tekchok goes on to say, method supported by wisdom, in other words, relative bodhicitta supported by ultimate bodhicitta, is cultivating the virtuous practices of love, compassion, generosity, ethical discipline, patient fortitude, effort and concentration, all the elements that make up the method side of the path, accompanied by the wisdom realizing that they are not inherently existent. We meditate on this wisdom by contemplating the emptiness of the three spheres, the agent, the action, and the object. To do this, in the case of generosity, we already mentioned the giver, the act of giving, and the recipient or the gift. If we think of this in terms of the practice of compassion, then the three spheres are the meditator, the compassion itself, and the sentient beings who are regarded with compassion. These three depend on each other. None of them exist inherently. If we have realized that things do not truly exist, mean that they do not independently, inherently, concretely exist from their own side, if we realize this, then our practice of the first 5 perfections are genuinely supported by wisdom. But even if we haven't realized emptiness yet, we can still contemplate in this way so that our practice of method is held by an echo or a reflection of the real wisdom. This is of great benefit. It was that last sentence that gave me a lot of encouragement when I was reading it earlier. Because for the practice to be a true combination of relative and ultimate bodhicitta, it must be supported by wisdom. And yet, the full wisdom of emptiness is quite a difficult thing to accomplish. Even after many years, and in some cases many lifetimes of study and practice, it can still remain rather elusive. The Geshe Tekchog is very encouraging by saying, even if we have not fully developed the wisdom directly understanding the lack of inherent existence, we can still practice with an echo or a reflection of the wisdom of emptiness. Lama Yeshe's, one of his favorite sayings was, "Good enough, dear." I think this is Geshe Tekchog's way of expressing the idea of good enough, dear. Anything that we can do to dissolve the overly concrete, solid way in which things are appearing to us. Whatever efforts we make in that direction is putting us on the track to gaining, and eventually to gaining an understanding of what emptiness actually means, the absence of inherent existence. And one of the ways that we can do that is keeping in mind what we were talking about previously, of viewing things as if they were dreams or hallucinations. So even though something may be appearing to us as concrete and solid and as existing externally, having nothing to do with our perception, even though that's the way things innately appear to us, right? If we keep in the back of our mind, this is like a dream, this is like a hallucination, then we don't buy into that appearance quite as strongly. There is room for us to relate to it in a much more transparent fashion. Because let's say what we're seeing now actually is a dream. You know, we hadn't yet woken up this morning and everything that's happening here is a dream, right? Then all the objects we see, all the people, the computer screen, everything like that doesn't exist out there solidly the way it's appearing to us now, but is just a reflection in our own mind. And if we could see it like that, then our attitude towards that is much more gentle, much more transparent. So at the moment, probably none of us are actually asleep and dreaming right now. Right? We're not having a sleeping dream. But according to the teachings, we are having a waking dream. A waking dream in which we take the appearances, the solid, separate, independently existing apparent appearances of things, we're taking that for reality. And therefore, when things happen that are pleasant, we get elated. When things happen that are unpleasant, we get depressed. And we live our entire life running back and forth, up and down, trying to find security for something which actually is as ephemeral as a dream. So even though we might not be able to attain a direct intuitive realization of emptiness, the lack of inherent existence, viewing things as if they were like a hallucination, they were like a dream, is very helpful for calming the grasping attitude with which we relate to ordinary appearances. So in these very imperfect introductory references to this yoga, the all-encompassing yoga, combining compassionate method and insightful wisdom, I've made quite a number of mistakes. And I hope that those are treated as like writing on water. The writing is there, but it disappears a second later. So I'm hoping that none of these mistakes or these misstatements leave any impression on our mind. One of the mistakes I made was very often, almost in every case, I neglected to set the motivation before we began. And I think in every case, and I hope this one will be an exception, I neglected to dedicate whatever merited what came from attending those sessions. So part of that is bad time management. And I think I've been quite guilty of that. So before we come to the end, within a minute or two of this session, we can think if there's any positive energy, even a small bit, generated in our minds by this very, very sketchy outline of the compassion, of the practice of combined method and wisdom. And any value in reading and listening to the words of Langri Tangbo's Practices of the Bodhisattvas and the commentary by Geshe Tekchok, if any of these have created any positive energy within our mind, then let's dedicate it so that by that virtue, we may steadily progress through the path, emulating those bodhisattvas who have practiced the 6 perfections, have traversed through the levels of the bodhisattva's understanding, and have achieved full enlightenment, thereby fulfilling not only their own purposes, but the purposes of all the sentient beings on whom our happiness and welfare depend. So let us dedicate even the smallest positive energy that we've cultivated for these purposes and for the long life of the precious gurus, such as His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Khyentse Sopa Rinpoche, and all of the other teachers revealing true paths leading to higher rebirth, liberation, and especially full enlightenment for an expanded scope of their teachings for the benefit of all beings. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Jon. There were some requests in the chat from people wanting to know the title of the text you were referring to by Geshe Tekchok.
Do we have time? Yeah.
Yeah.
The original text was called The 37 Practices of All Bodhisattvas. And the text by Geshe Tekchok is called Transforming Adversity into Joy and Courage, the 37 Practices of Bodhisattvas. And let's see, it looks like that. But I'm sure we can distribute that title. Any other question? Okay. Thank you, everybody.
If there are no questions, John, on behalf of everyone, I would love to wish you happy Mother's Day. And thank you for all the nurturing and love that you have brought in these teachings. They have been very short, but so profound and helpful to all of us. And we're so grateful that you accepted the invitation to lead these teachings, which have not been done before. And I know how much preparation you put into every session. So thank you so, so much. And we hope you will come back again and lead more of these sessions. And everyone, please feel free to unmute yourself and offer your greetings to John.